So welcome back to the channel, and today we have a Q&A video, so let's get straight into it. Now, the first two questions, I feel like they go hand in hand, so I'm just going to put them both on the screen and read them out. But the first question is, why doing runway shows might not always be the best decision for young independent designers? And the second question is, should fashion schools teach mandatory fashion business classes? So yeah, I feel like my answer to these questions are kind of one and the same. So that's why I've grouped these two questions together. But what I will say is that from working in the fashion industry for a really long time now, I'm 26, and the first time I ever did any job in fashion, I was 17. So I've almost been working in the industry for 10 years, which is insane considering my age. But I've worked in every single part of the fashion industry you can imagine. I've been a pattern maker. I've done like a design internship role. I've done a more general fashion internship role where I'm doing everything from getting coffee to going on supplier visits and like going to see where the buttons are supplied and like collecting the buttons from the shops and the zips. And I've had jobs where I've worked in a warehouse and it's just my job to keep stock of everything that's in the warehouse, making sure that I know everything coming in and going out. I've done so many jobs before I finally decided to be a journalist. And that's why I think as a journalist, I understand design from a deeper level in terms of even the construction. And because I'm so aware of the way the business of fashion works, because I've worked at so many different parts of it, I've seen all the different sides of it. Certain things that occur to me don't occur to most fashion designers I see. And this just reminds me when I was in fashion school and I'd have conversations with fashion design students and they did not have the slightest clue how the business of fashion works. A good example is when I was in school, I was talking to a designer and they were saying that, oh, their dream is to be stocked in this shop and that shop. And I was trying to explain to this designer that if you're a new brand, if you're an emerging brand, you're not going to get favorable deals. So if you want to be with those huge like department stores like a Selfridges and all these kind of big places, it's going to be a horrible deal you're going to sign. It's going to be like a sale or return type deal. And if you don't know what a sale or return is, essentially what happens is if you're an emerging designer and stores don't really know if your stuff would sell in their store or not because they have no track record, because they haven't sold your product before, they'll put you on a sale or return, which means that everything that they sell in the store, then it gets sold and you keep the money as a designer. But anything that doesn't get sold, they basically return the clothes to you and then you have to reimburse them or refund them the money from the clothes that don't sell, which is insane. But that kind of deal is more common than you think. The only time when you have leverage with a lot of department stores or just like independent stores is when you've had seasons with them where stuff clearly sells. So the brand knows that your stuff sells in their store and it works in their store. So therefore, they're more willing to give you a favorable deal, like actually being like, okay, this time I'm going to buy 50 pieces from you and they're going to buy it. So whether it sells or not in their store, as a designer, you don't have to worry about that. But you don't get those kind of deals until you're a very established designer. If you're a new designer, you're constantly walking on eggshells. That's why a lot of brands, you see them for like 3 seasons, and then after 3 seasons, they completely go under and they go bankrupt because a lot of designers, once again, because they don't know how the industry works, they don't know how to manage money, they don't know how to run a business. When you're on these sale or return deals, you have to watch how you spend your money. You can't just be spending all the company's money because if you have no money left and now these clothes get returned and now you have no money, then what do? Now you have to go bankrupt. Now you have to take all these loans with crazy interest rates. And it's so many moving parts. I know all these things because I've worked in the industry. I've worked at a brand where I've worked for an emerging brand where we've had those sale or return deals. I've seen them with my own eyes. I've worked at a more established brand where it's the complete opposite. And they're literally making $200,000 with one store and it's not a sell or return. It's just they sell it to the store and then the store has to worry about selling it. So all these nuances of the industry. I speak to these design students. They want to have brands. They don't even know anything about this. And I'm just like, why? Like, it shocks me. It absolutely baffles me how little a lot of designers know. Another example I've seen from designers is some designers don't understand that they need to build a core audience to have a sustainable brand. So you guys might even notice this. I know so many designers that you can't buy anything directly from them, which is insanity. But it's because they don't want to handle shipping and they don't want to handle these things. So they do their complete business on, we're going to stock in stores and let the stores worry about selling it. I don't want to sell it personally. But if you're trying to build like a very strong core audience, you have to do direct sales, because that direct transaction with a customer base builds brand loyalty in a way that you can't really build it if people are only getting stuff from stores. Stores are good in terms of people can try things on and all that stuff. But if there's no way for consumers to directly buy things from you because they want to put the money in your pocket, you're losing out on slowly building a core audience. And also, your profit margins on stuff that you sell direct to consumer are way higher than what you sell to stores, because at stores, you're selling things at wholesale price. When you sell stuff direct to consumer, you're selling people stuff at the market price. So you're getting the profit that the stores are normally getting when you sell stuff to stores at, the wholesale price, and then they increase it to the actual like marketed price. And it's just all these things. And it's like, that's why as a designer, you have to start thinking from early how you're going to build your infrastructure for shipping, how you're going to design your website, all these things, you have to think about it. Or I know a lot of designers that don't really have a high grasp on how much stock they have, what styles of stuff they have. A lot of them like overproduce, which is an absolute disaster. Because if you have one bad season and you overproduce clothes, that can send your brand into oblivion. Like, I've literally worked for a brand where this is the brand that I was working in the warehouse. Like, I was the one in charge of the stock, making sure that all the stock was in place and the right numbers of stock for every single style. And I had to know everything that was going in, that was going out as well. And in this, with this brand, I remember they had one season where a lot of the stuff wasn't selling and we ran out of space in the warehouse, and it was already a huge warehouse, and it was costing this brand a lot of money to rent. So they had to kind of cut their losses because they did the maths and they're like, okay, the cost of getting a bigger warehouse to house all these clothes, or just to sell all these clothes for like dirt cheap, it's actually more cost effective to sell them for dirt cheap. So I think they ended up selling it to TK Maxx. In America, that's what you guys call TJ Maxx, for like crazy prices, and they just had to cut their losses and then restart. But they lost so much money. And that's literally what can happen to a designer when, let's say you have these, going back to the sale or return deals, where if a lot of stuff doesn't sell and all this stuff is getting returned to you and you don't even have the warehouse space to house all these things, now you're in serious trouble. You're in big trouble. So as a designer, before you start a brand, you have to be thinking about all these things. And that's why my advice would be for most people, if you want to start a fashion brand, I wouldn't even advise. I think in fashion, and I remember this at CSM, it was glamorized to like graduate and have this brand. And I'm telling you, I've seen it year over year over year over year. Most of these brands are going to fail. And I'm not saying it to be mean. It's just the reality. If you want to have a sustainable business long term, when you graduate, go and work for different brands, go and work for different companies, go and work, if you want to be a journalist, go and work at different magazines, write for different places. For example, I'm really young, relatively, I'm 26, but I've worked in the industry for almost 10 years. So me starting my own fashion magazine a few years ago is someone starting a fashion magazine that has already worked in the industry for a while. It's not someone that has no experience of the industry, no contact, no connections, just out of the blue, just trying to like move the heavens and basically split the ocean apart like Moses. Like, it's just so unrealistic to do things that way. I would suggest that go and work, and then in your 30s or your 40s, start a brand. That's a sustainable way to do it. Because another moving part with the business of having a fashion brand is the factories that you use. Now, if you've worked in fashion for a while, you build certain contacts that you don't build if you haven't worked in the industry. So, for example, me as a journalist, because I'm a journalist, I have so many friends that are journalists. So if I create a product, or if I, like my magazine, for example, I had so much press. I mean, my magazine was featured in Vogue Business. My magazine was featured in Show Studio. It was featured in so many different places, right? And I didn't pay anyone to do it. And I also didn't ask anyone to do it. The reason why people did it is because a lot of journalists are my friends, and they also like what I do and genuinely are interested in what I do. So when I do stuff, they kind of want to support it, and that's one way that they can support it. But I'm not going to stand here or sit here and pretend that them writing about my stuff and the press that it got didn't do a lot of good for me, because it did a lot. It's done, like, all the press I've gotten has really, really boosted my career over the recent years. But I only have those connections because I've worked in the industry for a certain amount of time, which has allowed me space to meet all these people and then become friends with these people over time. Now, if you haven't worked in the industry and you're starting from scratch, you don't have that. So that's why you have brands who end up paying too much money for press and then going bankrupt really quickly. And that's why I say fashion is a relationship-based business. And it's also the kind of industry where if you're not business savvy, you don't last very long. And the same can be said for factories. If you are someone that has worked in the industry for a while, you might have a better relationship with factories than someone who is completely new to fashion, which means that you'll have more favorable things. For example, you might pay less than someone else that is using that factory, and it might be literally producing the same thing. They might prioritize your things, which is very important as a fashion designer with a fashion brand, because I know people that have lost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars overnight because there's a delay in the process of the factory, and that delay from the factory means that the deadline of stuff that they had to ship to whatever store, Selfridges, take your pick, whatever big store, Harvey Nichols, it doesn't go to these stores in time. And then the stores then turn around and say, okay, since you didn't send us these clothes on time, and we have our plan to sell this thing, and this is our plan, and kind of because you're sending this thing late, it's going to mess with our plan. So now, because you've breached your agreement of the contract, because you didn't ship the clothes to us on the day that is specified in the contract, we now have the right to legally break this contract, which means we're no longer going to be accepting the clothes, which means you as a designer won't get the money for the clothes, but you've paid the factory all this money to produce clothes that you thought you were going to send to the store, but because it's late, now you as a designer, you're left in the hole. But some designers I know, because they have such a good relationship with their factory, in dire situations where the factory has a delay, things happen. It's the fashion industry, things go wrong. Things go wrong in every industry, to be fair. But they will prioritize your clothes because you have a good relationship with them and they want to keep that business with you. So there are so many moving parts. I'm just scratching the surface of all the business that goes into running a successful fashion brand. It's unbelievable. I mean, I've worked in the industry for almost 10 years. It's too much to talk about. And it's just insane that this stuff doesn't get taught at school. At CSM, they have this thing of trying to make you the most creative person. And while that's really cool and fine and dandy, it's not realistic in terms of you have to teach these kids about business, because all of these designers think they're all just going to start a brand and be successful. And the reality is most of them will fail, apart from maybe the rich kids who can continue burning a hole in their pocket until maybe something does work. And then that's how they become successful eventually, after burning millions of dads and mums' money and draining their bank accounts. And so I say all of this to say, anyone that has worked in the industry for many years, anyone that knows about the business of fashion, has worked in it, has worked within the industry for a while, knows that the return on investment for a fashion runway show, especially when you're a fashion brand that doesn't have good infrastructure, is not great. Because let's say you're not ready for it and you have a successful runway show, it's a disaster because you have all these buyers that want to buy your clothes. You don't have the infrastructure to, fulfill all these orders from all these stores. And now, because most of these young fashion brands, they have one chance. That one big season when every single store wants to stock you and everyone wants to buy your stuff and you don't have the infrastructure and you deliver all your stuff late because you didn't have the factory infrastructure, you've blown your chance. So you have to be ready. And so as a young designer, honestly, for the first couple of years, don't do runway shows. That's why people like Peter Do, I really love what Peter Do did. Peter Do was so established before Peter Do finally did the first show at New York Fashion Week. Extremely established. But what a lot of designers do, the more savvy ones, they have showrooms in Paris. So even if they're not showing in Paris, they're not having runway shows in New York, London, Milan, wherever, they still make sure they have showrooms in Paris because all the big shows happen in Paris, which means all the big journalists, all the big buyers are all going to be in Paris. So that's a chance for them to be able to lure these buyers and these journalists and just stylists into their showroom in between shows. And when I'm in Paris, I go to so many brand showrooms just to see what they're doing, meet the designers, look at the clothes, have a feel for different brands that are like coming through and are going to be the next big thing. It's almost like a rite of passage, but that is really what you should be doing. You should, if you're a young designer, you should invest in having a showroom, work really hard on having a good relationship with your factory so that when you are in a financial position where it makes sense to have a runway show, it's not in vain. It's in a circumstance where you can fulfill the orders and everything can work. And so that's why I think having runway shows for young designers is an absolute disaster. And if you're a designer, just look at the case studies. There's so many case studies. I was reading this really good article in the New York Times not too long ago. In this article was really a profile piece on the designer Elena Velez. And now Elena Velez is an amazing designer. I think Elena Velez is supremely talented. And I think from a design skill standpoint, I think Elena is amazing. But what really stood out to me, and it's something that will consistently stand out to me, is once again the lack of understanding of business. Because it was an article that was talking about her struggles with the fashion business and how her brand is facing bankruptcy. And I think in the article, she was saying that at the time of the article, she only had $370 in her account. And her account was actually in the negative. But she made a $400 sale like not too long before the interview, which is like insane. She then went to talk about how one of her runway shows cost her $40,000, and a lot of how she's been funding it is she borrowed money from her mum's like retirement fund and also just from her own personal savings. But reading the article, and you guys just read the article, I'll leave all the links to all the articles I talk about in this video in the description below. But when you read the article, you really just get a sense of someone that doesn't really have a plan financially, someone that isn't really business savvy, someone that really doesn't know what they're doing from a business standpoint. You get that sense immediately just reading through it. I mean, there was a part of the article, and I'm just scrolling through it now to remind myself of kind of what was said. But there was a part of the article where she was essentially talking about how she was put forward for this award, and the grand prize of this award was $150,000, I think, and she was a finalist. And she had made this whole plan of everything she was going to do financially if she won the money, but then she didn't win it. But then she ended up winning another prize that was the prize was lower. So I think she got $20,000, and to her it felt like a loss because she had this elaborate plan of what to do with the money. Now, if you're business savvy, you don't make plans based on money that doesn't exist, like based on some crazy variable like you winning an award. You don't make financial plans based on stuff like that. You make financial plans based off of what is realistically coming in every month, what you can kind of guess or suggest your regular income and your regular outgoings will be if all things remain normal and no crazy thing happens. That's how you make a business plan. You don't make an elaborate plan just in case you win $150,000. That's not how you run a business. If we're really trying to have an adult, serious business conversation, that is not how you run a business. And I think that a lot of designers, once again, because they haven't really worked in the industry for too long, and most designers, if they have worked in the industry, like if they've interned in a very specific design role. Whereas I have a very different perspective because, once again, I've done so many different roles. I've literally worked in marketing in fashion as well. So there's not a wide understanding of all the different facets that goes into running a brand successfully and the long-term health of a brand, making sure it's good. And reading the article was really difficult to read because I could see a lot of myself through what Elena was talking about, in terms of Elena saying that obviously she doesn't come from like a rich background. She didn't have any connections in fashion. The fact that, it's very difficult when you come from a working class background to make it in fashion, which is very true. Because most of the kids that do make it, especially in recent times, are kids that their parents have a lot of money, or, their parents work in the industry. And it's tough because I was the same way. There is no one in my whole family that works in fashion, plus extended family, sorry. They didn't, like, when I wanted to work in fashion, no one in my whole family line understood what I was doing. They didn't get it. And they couldn't really support me because they didn't understand the way the industry works. They didn't have any connections with people in the industry. So I had to build my career literally from the ground up, literally from scratch, like Elena is talking about, like literally knew not a single soul that worked in fashion, not even one person. And I had to build my network from ground zero, literally. And so I understand when designers say that, it's really hard, because it is. It's extremely hard. But at the same time, what really hurts me is that because fashion is so hard, I feel like if you're going to have a really serious conversation about the business of fashion and really building a business that will last, you have to have a very almost offensive, grown up, what are the words I'm looking for? Kind of facts over feelings conversation. I feel like if you don't have that kind of tough love conversation with people that have no connections, that are kind of coming from my perspective, where your parents don't work in fashion, you're not from a rich family, you're trying to make it from ground zero, someone that you need to get a mentor of, someone that has worked in the industry that can give you that tough love and tell you things as they are. That will tell you need to just work hard and work in that place because that's what you have to do right now. Because otherwise, you just get a lot of designers who don't really know what they're doing, and you can tell that they're passionate, but they just don't know what they're doing, which will ultimately lead to their demise, which is so sad. But that's just reality. I actually want to read a section of the New York Times article because I think this part of the article, just what was said, is something that is really, really eye-opening. So it says, the problem Miss Velez has learned is that recognition, the buzz around awards, reviews, and celebrity endorsements doesn't always yield tangible returns. If anything, she said, it contributes to the idea that things are going well when they are not. And these metrics have not been easy for her to explain to venture capitalists. How many accomplishments do I have to collect, and how many cosigns and check marks does it take before people invest in helping me keep myself afloat? Miss Velez said, with an expletive or two. Nobody's malicious. Everyone is just busy doing their own thing and assuming that you can take care of your own business, which theoretically you should be able to do. But we can't deny that there's a lot of money in this space and a lot of people who are playing with their own. While home in Wisconsin a few months ago, she said, she drove past an Arby's with a sign advertising a manager position for something like $20 an hour. It occurred to her that there was more stability in that job, even if her job's perks included an invitation to sit at the Balenciaga table at the Met Gala in May. Then she realized she was unqualified for anything but fashion. It's a heavy, heavy, heavy burden for me and a lot of people that I love, she said. And I think that I could live a healthier, more sustainably paced life doing another thing. And this is really, really, really eye-opening. And I think just to react to all the different paragraphs that I read. So earlier in what I read, she was talking about how, well, they were just saying that, these accomplishments and the press, it doesn't really translate to making money. And that's very true because, once again, fashion is a relationships-based business. She alluded to this also because she said that, but we can't deny that there's a lot of money in this space and a lot of people who are playing with their own. And that's where the relationships come in. That's why you have to have good relationships with people and you have to be nice and you have to, not play the game, because I have genuine friends from the fashion industry. So it's not like I'm playing a game. They're actually my friends. But you have to also be like open-minded to meet different kinds of people and get along with people. Because once again, fashion is all about the relationships you have. And that's why the difference between having a successful career and not having a successful career is literally who you know. I mean, look at people like John Galliano. John Galliano, extremely talented designer. But John Galliano is also someone that managed to get on Anna Wintour's radar. And Anna Wintour kind of almost convinced Bernard Arnault to hire John Galliano. And that's how John Galliano ended up at Givenchy and then Dior, and the rest is history, right? And that's the thing, that at CSM, and I see this every year because, I went to CSM. I saw sensational graduate collections. I'm talking on the level of stuff that's way more interesting than the biggest fashion brands are doing. But a lot of these designers might not go anywhere with their careers because they just don't know the right people. The right people aren't seeing their things, right? So that's the thing with press and all these things. It's not really going to lead to money per se, but it's going to lead to people knowing who you are. And then you might get in the face of people that then could be the reason why you get this big job at a big house, or the reason why, someone endorses your brand or investors want to invest in your brand. It's not direct. All these things are not direct. So, for example, when my magazine was featured in Vogue Business, it wasn't like I started making loads of money overnight, but so many industry established journalists started to follow me and follow what I was doing. And then over the course of, months and years from that article, those same people then were like, oh, do you want to do this project? We'll pay you for this. Do you want to do this? We think you would be a good fit for this. So it's not direct. So you have to be patient. And in the meantime, you just have to plan for the money that you can have and the money that, you think you can have regularly. And you have to make plans to make sure that there's a base level of what you're selling, if that makes sense. And there's many things you can put in place to make sure that that is a reality. I won't get into that. Otherwise, this will literally become a business course instead of a YouTube video. That's a Q&A video. But yeah, these things stand out to me because the thing about this designer is that if her brand goes bankrupt, it's not because of a lack of talent. The talent is there. It's a lack of just business acumen. Another really good article to read as a case study, and I'm spending a lot of time answering this question because it's a question I get all the time, and I know a lot of designers watch my channel, so I really want to provide serious value if I'm going to answer this question. So another article you can read is called Why Britain's Young Designers Are Struggling. Now, if you guys know anything about the London fashion landscape, London, unfortunately, is a place where we have some of the most talented designers come out from London every year, but we also have so many stories of designers that only last a few seasons and they go under. And kind of fashion designers in London are always in this limbo of like, it's just we're always churning out new designers that are amazing and then you don't hear from them after like 3 or 4 seasons. It's really sad. And in this article, they're talking about some designers that are doing some really big things like SS Daily, who recently won the LVMH prize, designers like Robin Lynch, Dilara Findakoglu. These designers not showing at the most recent London Fashion Week because some of them couldn't afford it. Like Dilara literally said that financially they just couldn't have a runway show. And I think in fashion we need to normalize people not doing runway shows. Like it shouldn't be a thing where people are like, oh, where are they this season? It's weird that they didn't have a runway show. And Martine Rose has really interesting things to say about this, because Martine Rose in the past has missed runway shows, and sometimes she has admitted that it's actually for financial reasons. But other times she's also said that she feels like if she doesn't have anything particular to say through the medium of a runway show, then what's the point of just doing it just to do it? Because that's the expectation, and spend £50,000 on a runway show when you don't really have anything to say and you're just going to waste money. And I genuinely think that the way fashion is set up doesn't help designers at all. And I'll tell you exactly why. So when I was at CSM, there were so many awards that designers could win. There was so much money. I was almost like fashion journalism students, or communications in general, which includes like the photography students and all that. There were not many awards for us because we're journalists and whatever, no one cares. But for fashion design students at CSM, there were so many awards. Like you could win, you could do like this project for this brand and earn like £20,000, or you could do this thing for this, or you could win this award or this prize. There were so many awards and prizes and support, financial support from like the BFC and all this thing. But my issue with the financial support, because the financial support is really good and the British Fashion Council do a lot to help emerging talent in London. I'm not going to say that they don't, because they do. And it's very needed. However, I just don't agree with giving designers money because they don't know what they're doing. Like I've literally just spent how long explaining all the business things that most design students graduating that have no experience working in fashion for the most part don't understand all these things in one. So when you give them money, they spend money on things that they think matter, but they don't actually know what the hell they're doing. And so they just waste the money. So that's why you have a lot of designers who will win a GQ fund and like they'll earn £150,000 winning that award and then blow the money on dumb shit, for lack of a better term. And then 3 seasons later, you're reading in the Business of Fashion that they've gone bankrupt and the brand is closing down. I think that my issue with fashion is there's so much money given to designers without the support. So it's just like, here you go, here's some money. That's not helping designers, in my opinion. I think those awards should come with serious mentorship with business people that can really guide these designers on, you know, what the next best steps are, what they should be doing, all those kind of things. And some of them do have these initiatives and mentoring programs that come with the money, but I don't know why all of them don't. Because if you're going to give someone a massive lump sum, someone that doesn't know anything about the business of fashion for the most part, hasn't really worked in the industry, how the hell are they going to know what to do with that money? Or how the hell are they going to know the best, most efficient way to spend it? The best place to put it? They won't. That's why it's best to have someone who's an industry expert, who has worked within the business of fashion, who can tell them, actually, okay, I've studied your brand, I've looked at your customer base, I've looked at the market, I've looked at your outgoings, I've looked at your monthly spend, I've looked at this. Maybe, rent a studio in this place, not that place. Maybe do this here, not that place. That is the kind of mentoring that these designers need. And in London, I think a lot of times designers get the money without the mentorship. And it's like, I just don't see the point of it. It's just pointless, because all you're doing is just prolonging the inevitable failure of these brands, because you're just giving them money that they're going to blow because they don't know how to allocate these funds. And then 3 years, 4 years down the line, you don't hear about them anymore. And it's sad, because I know I'm being a bit harsh, but these are brands I love. Like, I love these brands. I think Craig Green is a sensational designer. I think Craig Green is amazing from a design standpoint. But Craig Green, for example, and I just wanted to mention Craig Green because I wanted to give an example, so I'm not always talking in like these things where it seems like I'm not talking about specific people, because I have hundreds of examples in my head. But just to mention Craig Green is a brand where Craig Green was one of those brands that got the funding, was part of Fashion East, got all this money. But Craig Green is still a brand that in the recent times has had endless financial struggles, so many financial woes. And once again, it's because I feel like all this money, it doesn't come with the mentorship. It doesn't come with, the knowledge. It just comes with the money and that's it. And it's sad. It's really sad because I don't want to see Craig Green go. I don't want to see Craig Green fail. I want the brand to thrive. But the reality is, as someone that is observing what is happening to the brand, it's clear to see what is going on. And so this is why, going back to the Q&A questions, I think one, it's 100% should be mandatory to do fashion business classes in fashion school. I don't know why it isn't. And two, this is why doing a runway show is not always the best direction for a young independent designer. And to be fair, I know some fashion designers because unfortunately, also when you go to fashion school, and this will be the last thing I'll say about this before I go to the next question. But unfortunately, when you go to fashion schools, especially the big fashion schools, so I'm talking about London College of Fashion, RCA, CSM, Parsons, IFM, Polymoda, like all these kind of schools. When you're a designer, they almost force you into the fashion system. So even when you create your own brand, you have the mindset that my brand is only going to work if I'm stocked in these stores and if I show at Fashion Week and if I do this. But you don't always have to do things that way. I know fashion designers that make millions of dollars, and they don't show at Fashion Week. They've never been featured in any publication like Vogue or Women's Wear Daily or The Business of Fashion or Dazed or ID or The Face or Harper's Bazaar, all these magazines. They've never been featured in Forbes or whatever. But they make millions and they have a niche audience of rich people that buy all their clothes and they're thriving. No one knows who they are. If I told you these designers now, you wouldn't even know who they were because they're not in the circle of people that, look at runway shows and know who Andrea Meister is and Yohji Yamamoto and Ziggy Chen and Uma Wang. It's not that school of thought. And it's experimental fashion too. It's not basic, fast fashion type clothes either. So also, you don't always have to follow the fashion system. There's so many different ways of doing things. And unfortunately, when you go to fashion school, they almost make it seem like that's the only way to be successful as a designer or to have a successful brand is to do things the very generic fashion system way, which it isn't. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer to those two questions. Hopefully, the fashion designers have learnt a lot from this. But to go to the next question is pay for different roles in fashion. So I guess this person is asking me what the pay is for different roles in fashion. Now, this isn't really a question that I can just answer. It's so varied. I mean, what level, at what role? Fashion is such a big industry that you can do anything in fashion. You can be a fashion lawyer. You can be a fashion accountant. You can be a fashion designer. You can be a fashion journalist. You can be something very specific like a pattern maker, a seamstress. So first of all, what job? Because they all come with different pay. And then also what level? So someone that's an editor-in-chief might be making 6 figures. But then if you're a journalist that's an intern at a magazine, you could be making minimum wage or sometimes even worse. So I don't know how to answer that question. What job, what level are you? Where are you working? For example, I think that salaries in the US generally in fashion are higher across the board than where I live in the UK. That's just how things are. I don't know why. Maybe because New York is more slightly expensive than London, so that's why the wages are higher. Who knows? So it also depends on location too. Certain countries for certain roles the market rate is just higher than other countries. So honestly, it just really depends. So I don't really know how to answer that question, but I hope that has clarified that it's quite varied. how much you can make in fashion. And people at the top of fashion make tons of money. Like the people that are editors in chiefs and creative directors, some of them make millions. So, and that's their salary, literally. So it just depends, honestly. And the last question I'm going to answer in this video is, after seeing the collaboration between A$AP Rocky and Puma, is his taste overrated? Oh, that's a really interesting and spicy question. So, for people that aren't aware, not too long ago, A$AP Rocky was announced as the creative director of Puma's partnership with Formula One. So he designed like the apparel collection for Puma and Formula One. And I come from a school of thought, looking at fashion, that it's very hard for me to, 100% say that something is just completely bad. I might say it for comedic effect, like I might be trying to be witty or funny, and I might just say, "Oh, that's really bad." But if I'm really being serious, how can you say something is bad when fashion is subjective and one person might like something that you don't? So I come from that school of thought. However, that being said, every time I look at anything that A$AP Rocky has designed, anything that comes out of his creative output that isn't a collaboration, that is just him as the creative director or him designing something, it's never that great. And it's weird because A$AP Rocky is someone that does have good taste, in my opinion. He's someone that obviously has good taste in music. He makes good music. He has amazing taste. If you just look at his music videos, look at the stuff that he's associated with, the collaborations he's done, everything is good. But then when he's the creative director, he is the one in charge of creating a vision. It always falls so flat. And I don't think that means that he lacks taste. I just think that he doesn't have the skill of design, or he doesn't have the taste when it comes to designing his own things. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have taste in terms of picking out stuff to wear that look amazing and picking things out when it's a collaboration and there's already a template that's been made and he can just add a certain creative output to an already made template. That's why when he collabs, it's always good. But then when it's solely him, it's not. Yeah, I don't know if that's an indicator that he has bad taste. I just think that he shouldn't be. Who am I? But it just means that maybe he's not the best fit to be creative director at some of these roles, because I just think creatively, from a design standpoint, I've never seen something that A$AP Rocky has created, clothing-wise, that I'm like, that's interesting. That has never, ever happened. And I don't even... So A$AP Rocky, even though I can say he's definitely stylish, his style is not, like, even in the A$AP mob, someone whose style fascinates me more is A$AP Nast. I think that A$AP Nast has way more interesting style than A$AP Rocky. I've always looked at A$AP Nast style and thought, oh, that's really interesting, more so than A$AP Rocky, even though A$AP Rocky is like a bigger name and is known more for fashion. From my personal standpoint, when I think of musical artists that I think have interesting style, I think mainly of A$AP Nast, I think of Steve Lacy, and I think of Tyler, the Creator, as far as menswear goes. I don't actually look at A$AP Rocky, and I don't look at Kanye either. But I think A$AP Rocky, he has a lot of influence in fashion, especially because he's a designer that is name-dropping brands like Andre Millamista and Raf Simons, and he was talking about these brands way before, like, TikTok was big and all these kids were talking about these brands. So I think just the allure that comes with the fact that he just knew about these brands. I feel like sometimes we put A$AP Rocky on this high pedestal, and I think we expect too much creatively from A$AP Rocky because of that expectation. So yeah, that's what I have to say about A$AP Rocky and whether he has taste or not. I definitely think he has taste, but people just don't have a talent for everything. Everyone is good at some things and not good at others. I have things I'm good at. Like, I know I can write. I went to school for journalism. I know how to edit a video. I know how to engage an audience through video. But then there are other things I'm not great at. So yeah, it just means he's not great at creatively outputting clothes. But that's it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that you've learnt something, especially with the fashion business segment. I took time to really actually talk about different things and touch on different things and different aspects of the business to really provide some serious understanding in terms of fashion as an industry and like the difficulty of actually making it in fashion. But on that note, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with another video very soon. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.